Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of this series on how to build real business systems without code using visual development. And in this part we're going to be focusing on the tools that we're going to be using to build our business systems, and we'll also be looking at the structure of how cloud systems are built so that we'll be able to delineate between which tool we're going to use for which purpose. So let's get straight into it. So let's start by looking at the structure of a cloud system. And so let's start at the front end, and the front end effectively is the part of the application that is running directly on the end user's device, whether that's a desktop machine, a laptop, a tablet or a mobile phone. Essentially it's what the user sees, it's what the user interacts with. And it could be a web app or it could be a mobile app. So with a web app, obviously that's something where the front end is running directly in the user's browser, and essentially when they hit a certain web address, a certain URL web address, then all of that front end is then loaded into the browser and then the browser executes it. Or with a mobile app, the user's pre-downloaded that using one of the app stores and then they run it from within the app. So the important thing with the front end is to note that that application is running directly on the end user's device. It's not running anywhere else, it's running on their device. Now then, the front end of an application or a cloud system is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the bit that the user sees, it's the bit they can see poking up above the water. However, it may only be half or even only a third of the actual application itself. And the other part of the equation is the back end. Obviously, if you've got a front end, you've got to have a back end. And the back end is what the user does not see. That's the bit that's sat under the water. It could be a half or it could be 2/3 of the application. So the back end is running on a computer in a data center somewhere, or what we commonly call the cloud. Okay, it's not running on the end user's device, it's running on a web server sat in a data center. So the other terms that we generally use for front end and back end, on the back end we often refer to that as being the server. Generally a web server, but we use the term server and back end interchangeably. And on the front end we often refer to that as being the client. Again, we use those terms interchangeably. And we may also call the front end the UI sometimes, which is the user interface. So if we mention anything about UI or client or front end, we're talking about the front end of the application, the bit that the user sees and that they interact with. So the way that the front end and the back end are connected is when the front end makes a request to the back end. Okay, so the front end or the client could have hundreds, thousands, millions, tens of millions of different devices, different users, all accessing the same back end. A good example of that would be something like Amazon on Black Friday, where lots of different people using their Amazon website or the Amazon front end will be making requests to the Amazon server, the back end. Obviously there's more than one server in the case of Amazon, but the principle is exactly the same. So somebody types a search on Amazon, that then makes a request to Amazon's back end. Now the back end primarily has two obligations effectively, okay, and these are tasks and data, and I've broken those two terms into their most basic format. Okay, tasks and data. So the task may be that it grabs the request, let's say a search, and it disseminates that and then passes it to the database and says, here's a search, go and get me the records, the product records that match that. Okay, and then it's going to, what we call, query that data to then get the data that's been requested from the front end. So we've got two things going on there. We've got one which is the data, which is stored on that server machine, and we've got the task that is essentially going to carry out anything that needs to be done in that process. Okay, and then when that is done, once that task is complete and we need to send a response to the front end, in this case it would be the search results, then effectively they would get sent down as part of a response to the front end, and then on the user's device it would then display that information. So there are a couple of terms that we use rather than tasks. We generally call those APIs. Okay, doesn't matter what API stands for, it essentially represents a task. So when the front end makes a request to the back end, the front end is actually saying to the back end, run a particular API. So the front end has some knowledge of what task has to be carried out at the back end, but what is involved in that task, it has absolutely no knowledge of. Okay, so that is the task side of it, and then the data side of it is the database, which is responsible for storing the data, getting requests for data, returning results of data. Okay, the API is what is run on the back end in response to a request from the front end, and the database is what stores, retrieves, and updates data. So to give you an example, a real world example is a restaurant. So you go into a restaurant, you're greeted, you're taken to your table, you're given a menu, and essentially that's the front end. In fact, it's even usually called front of house in a restaurant. So you pick the menu, you give it to your order to the waiter, and then he takes that request to the kitchen. Now he's taking it to the back end. Okay, now what happens at the back end now is you don't know that. All that you know is it's going to get taken, it's going to get processed, it's probably going to get stored. Somebody's going to go and get the ingredients, somebody's going to cook it, the chef's going to cook it, and then it's going to be brought out to you again by the waiter, and then you eat your dinner, which again is the front end. So essentially it mirrors that type of process. So the reason that I've explained all of this is because the two tools that we'll be using, each has responsibility for each of these sections of the structure of the app. So one tool will be dealing with the front end, one tool will be dealing with the back end, and then they communicate with each other quite seamlessly. So the tools that we'll be using for the front end to build our front end app, which again is the part that the user interacts with, is Nordcraft. And the tool that we'll be using for the back end, which deals with the API and the database, is Xano. Again, both do it without code, both are using visual development. Now, having worked with many different tools in the visual development space, there's no doubt that these two are the cream of the crop of visual development tools. Nordcraft is exceptional at developing front end. It's, like I said in the intro, it's professional grade, and the same with Xano. It really is a solid back end you can rely on without any of the technical details to get bogged down in. It's just going to deliver exactly what you would expect it to do. So we've got these two excellent systems, visual development systems, that we're going to go through. So let's take a look at their websites. The links are all in the description if you want to have a look. So here's a Nordcraft website, nordcraft.com. We handle the DX, which is the developer experience. You remember I was saying that it's fun to build using these visual development tools. Well, the developer experience is what makes it fun and productive and enjoyable to use. You craft the UX. The UX is the user experience, so that's your job to create the best user experience, the best UI for the user. So effectively, it combines a modern lightweight framework with a visual editor. We call it the Web Development Framework. Let's just take a look. Here's a kind of a screenshot of the editor, the Nordcraft editor. Okay, it excels at enabling you to design your pages, style your pages. This is interesting, is that we've got an AI assistant right now, but coming early in 2026 is what we call generative AI. So the idea is that you'll be able to bypass the laborious parts of building and use its AI to do that. Vibe coding is dead, according to Nordcraft. So the idea is that you can use generative AI, but then you're in control of it, as I mentioned in the intro. Animations you can do. Here's the workflow, which you probably looks familiar from what I mentioned in the intro, because that workflow screenshot was taken from Nordcraft. Okay, you can call any API of any backend. It's really, really useful, as we just discussed. Close that. This is where we can have designers and developers working together on a team, which is really nice. the future of web development. We built the tool we always wanted. So, you know, they're holding the crystal ball there. I actually agree with this. I'm quite bullish that the future of software development is visual development with AI assistance. I'm quite bullish about that. Now, this is quite key with Nordcraft, is that Nordcraft is built in Nordcraft. So the editor is built in the tool itself. So when the guys at Nordcraft are updating and working on their own editor to improve it, they're using their editor to do that. So this is kind of like the ultimate form of what we call dog fooding. So dog fooding is a phrase in software development that essentially means use your own tools, use your own software that you're building, and it will make you help you to build a better product. So this is kind of extreme dog fooding. Okay, and then there's lots of different features that there is included. I won't go into all these. I don't want to overwhelm you at this point, but that is essentially Nordcraft. And having worked with it for a few years now, exclusively for the last 2 years, but I was involved in its very early betas back in early 2022 or 23. It really is the creme de la creme of front-end builders. So let's have a look at Xano now. We can see they build with AI speed, deploy with confidence. Xano have kind of gone all in on AI in the last 6 to 12 months, so in 2025. And a lot of their buzzwords are all around that, but don't get too confused. The fastest way to build production-ready backends, API, data, logic, infrastructure. If we have a look at that platform where it says build visually, the backend built for visual development. Originally, the way that you built it in Xano was exclusively using visual development. They've since introduced the ability to develop in code and with AI in there as well. So what you can do essentially is build with visual development, but simplify things or automate or speed things up using AI, which is now pretty much part of any platform, visual development platform you get. But the point is that, you know, you can create things with AI, but you have full control because you're not dealing with code, you're dealing with visual development. Also, they have a full article here under solutions on visual development, which is really, really interesting and definitely worth a read. Xano.com/visual-development. Again, I'll put a link to that in the description. So finally, we'll take a look at this, which is xano.com/connect/Nordcraft, which is Xano's page on connecting to Nordcraft. We'll go through this in more detail, but they work together very, very nicely, as we'll show in the next couple of videos as well. So just to show you that I walk the walk and not just talk the talk, this is an application that I've developed in recent months, and this is a complete business system that's a SaaS application. Although I've built systems for clients in the past, this is my own SaaS. It's still early days for this, but it does have active paying customers at the minute. In 2026, I'll look to be scaling this out quite a lot, but this is the app as it stands. So everything that you see here in this app has been developed on the front end with Nordcraft. It's also been developed with Xano and also Supabase at the back end, which is a tool that we're not going to cover in this tutorial. But essentially, there really isn't any limit to what you can do to build out the app that you want in Nordcraft. Effectively, there really isn't any limit at all. So I absolutely love it. It's a fantastic front-end builder, and you can build whatever you can think of, essentially. Okay, so how much is all of this going to actually cost you? Well, let's go to the pricing. And what is great is that you can build the entire app, front end and back end, completely for free. So we can see here on Nordcraft that you get a free tier, every editor feature. So there's not an editor feature that is hidden behind a paywall. Okay, you use everything. The limitation really is that you only get a Nordcraft domain. So when you want to put your own domain name on there, you should. And also you'll get some Nordcraft branding on it. But once you launch, you get everything included, and it's $29 per month per developer that's working on it. That's paid annually. If you want to pay monthly, it's $36 a month. So you can build for free as and when you launch. It's then going to cost you $36 a month or $29 if you want to pay annually. So what about Xano? Let's go over to their pricing. Again, it's completely free. Now, 12 months ago, it would have been difficult for me to recommend Xano because once you were off the free tier, the starting plan was actually quite expensive. But luckily, about 6 months ago, they completely changed their pricing. And so you can build entirely for free. There is some limitations on what you can do in the free one, but not for the purposes of what we're doing in this tutorial. And you can build completely for free on there. Then when you're ready to go, then you can essentially go on the starter plan, which is $25 a month. Pay yearly. If you want to pay monthly, it's $29. So $36 to $29, $65 a month when you're ready to launch, but you can build completely for free. So it's absolutely fantastic. So the cost shouldn't be an issue for anybody wanting to build on these platforms. The other issue that comes up is vendor lock-in. That's one of the things that people worry about. Nordcraft is open source, so you can take your app and you can run it anywhere. You can essentially self-host. Obviously, then you're managing everything then. If you just leave it to Nordcraft, they're dealing with all of that. So initially, you may want to host with Nordcraft, and later on maybe go and self-host when you've got the facilities to be able to do that, but you are certainly not locked in. The same with Xano, by the way, is that while it is proprietary, you can self-host on certain plans as and when you're ready. But certainly to start off with, I don't know why you would do that, because when you're starting off, because they're going to handle it all for you. All of the hosting, all of the deployment. As you develop, you just deploy it and it's ready to go on both sides, front and back end. Everything's dealt with for you for what is a relatively small cost. So I think they're absolutely perfect solutions. Use their hosting, fairly low cost, and then if you ever need to get a bit more freedom, a bit more independence, you are not locked in by any means. It's going to be a different experience than if you're hosting directly with them, but it is certainly something that you can do. So that concludes this part of the tutorial. In the next part, we'll be jumping in to Nordcraft and Xano. So just before we go, make sure before we get into the next part, if you want to follow along, is make sure that you go to get started on Xano and set yourself up an account. You can do that by logging in or signing up with your Google account. I should mention that when you're setting up your Xano account, it's going to ask you a series of questions. All fine, just enter in exactly what applies to you. But at some point, you're going to get this section here that's going to say set up your workspace, and it's going to give you the option to create with AI or start from scratch. If you're going to follow along with this tutorial, make sure you do select the start from scratch option. This is going to do all sorts for you that at this stage we're not quite ready for, especially we're going to be going step by step through this tutorial. So just make sure that you select the start from scratch option when you get to this page of the setup. The same with Nordcraft, just click sign up here in their website, so you can sign up with Google as well. So when we've got both accounts set up, then we can carry on and we can connect the two together, and that's what we'll do in the next couple of parts of this tutorial. As I mentioned, if you're interested in going into more intermediate and advanced level, then there's a link in the description. Click that, sign up to the wait list, and I'll let you know when those courses are going to be available. Thanks for watching, thanks for sticking with me, see you in the next one.